In one of my previous videos with the title, God Told Me to Move Across the Country to Study at Seminary Through a Dream, I detailed how God spoke to me through a dream and used a person to guide my family and I to drive over 2,200 miles from Sacramento, California to Jeffersonville, Indiana to begin studying at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. It was nothing short of miraculous, in my eyes anyways, and I still marvel at how the Lord works in my everyday life. Now, driving across the country to begin a new adventure at seminary with limited funds, no home, and no job, and knowing that there would be plenty of costs ahead was not something to be taken lightly. But my faith in the Lord, as shaky as it has been at times, propelled me to go anyways. Now, in this video, I will continue the story from before and show you just how faithful the Lord is when He tells you to do something way out of your comfort zone and then you step out in faith. Stay with me, and I pray that through my story, you will learn to trust the Lord when He calls you. Hello amigos, Roberto here, and welcome to Missionali, where we study the Bible, we live it, and we share it with the world. Now, as excited as I was in the previous video, due to my Lord providing for the studies at seminary, I did not mention that before we left on our journey, we had no home to arrive to, no job to provide some steady income, and no second car for my wife to use with the children when I was at school. However, the Lord's call was so strong and so clear that I completely stepped out in faith. Now, the money that was collected from our church body was enough to pay for one semester of schooling and 1 month's rent. But I thought, if I don't find a job quickly, then I will have to use some of that seminary money to pay for our living expenses, and who knows what will happen to my studies then. And now, I was trying my best to keep my faith strong and not show any of my distress, but I could definitely feel the doubt creeping in, as happens to everybody. And I would watch my wife and my 3 young children completely put their trust in me to make sure that everything was going to work out, so trust me, I was feeling a little bit of stress. Now, I remember that it took us 4.5 days of driving to reach Mount Olive, Illinois from Sacramento. We stayed with some very dear friends for a couple of days just to recharge before making the trip to Louisville, Kentucky, because we needed to look for some housing. Now, this is how naive I was at the time. I simply thought that I could drive the 4 hours to Louisville by myself, quickly find some housing, come back to Mount Olive, pick up my family, and then the next day head back to our new home in Louisville so that we could begin our new life as I began my studies at seminary. Easy, right? Well, guess what? The plans in my perfect little world didn't quite work out the way that I expected them. Let me give you a quick recap of what happened. First, my wife says, I'd like to come and see the place where we're going to live. I want to make sure that it's suitable for the kids and I. Now, the problem was at that moment, I was only thinking about myself. And as a guy, I just need a place to sleep, some food, and I'm good, right? Well, guess what? That's not the way a woman works. And you fellas know what I'm talking about. Then my wife says, and I want to take the kids too. So I said, wait a minute, they're going to slow us down and everything is going to be much more difficult. So I kept objecting and objecting, but as you can guess, I did not win that battle. So we all loaded into the minivan and drove the 4 hours from Mount Olive to Louisville. Now, when we arrived, I had a quick job interview that I had lined up before, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out. When I got back to the van, our little boy, who was 2 years old at the time, all of a sudden got really sick and he just started vomiting everywhere, all over himself, all over the car seat, the van. I mean, it was just a big old nasty mess. So I ended up getting a room on campus at the seminary hotel and spent the rest of the day and evening washing clothes, feeding the kids, and doing my best not to fight with my wife because we hadn't even seen one potential place to live in because we had to deal with our sick child. Now, I was not happy at that moment. In fact, I was pretty angry, and that's putting it mildly. It was all I could do not to scream. I know that the thoughts I had at that moment were not very Christian, let me tell you. But that's where I was mentally as I felt the stress just continue to build inside of me. The next morning, I checked the newspaper for some rentals, but since I hadn't planned very well, I didn't know if the houses or apartments were in good or bad areas of the town. And I really wasn't in the mood to go on a treasure hunt since my son was still not feeling well. So we were on limited time, limited funds, and I knew we couldn't stay another night, and we had to return to Mount Olive that very day. I was so naive to think that everything would work out so quickly and easily. In fact, I was actually at that moment started to feel pretty dumb and inadequate. And you know what? That's how the devil works. He attacks you when you're down, and most of the time, it's just pure mental warfare. He whispers thoughts into your mind like, God has failed you. If he really loved you, he would have provided a home for you by this time. You're not worth anything, and you've traveled all this way for nothing, and your family is going to suffer for it. I remember walking to the student union on campus from the seminary hotel and praying to the Lord. Father, you told me to come to this specific place to study, and you know that we haven't been able to look for any places to live in because our son is really sick. Now, if you don't come through, I really don't know what I'm going to do. So please, a little help. So I was looking on the housing board and saw nothing that would work, and I was completely dejected and getting ready to leave when my gaze was drawn to a small piece of paper all the way down in the far right corner, and it simply said, for rent. I grabbed it and I saw that a duplex was for rent in the city of Jeffersonville, Indiana, right across the Ohio River from Louisville. We checked out of the hotel and drove the 6 miles to Jeffersonville. Now, we arrived at the duplex and I saw like a handyman doing some type of work on the front door. I said, excuse me, I understand this place is for rent. He turns to me and says, I'm sorry, this is not for rent. So I said, wait a minute, I just saw an advertisement at the seminary that said that this duplex was for rent. And he says, oh, you're from the seminary? Yeah, this is for rent. You see, I'm very particular about who I rent this to, and I really wanted a seminary student. Come on in, take a look. So I introduced him to my wife and 3 children as we chatted and looked around for about 20 minutes. It was moderate size, but it only had 2 small bedrooms, and we were a family of 5. However, it did have a big basement and a very large backyard. Now, one way or another, we were going to have to make it work if we received this place because we didn't have anything else. After he explained the rules and rent requirements, I said, look, I'm about to start school in about a week, and I don't have a job, and we recently had to declare bankruptcy. I really need this place, but I can't pretend to know what's going to happen with my finances. So he looks over at my kids and says, you have a really beautiful family, and I'm really glad that you brought your kids so I can meet them. Now, I have to do the standard background check, but I have a good feeling about you, and I really think that everything is going to work out because you're here to serve the Lord. I'll call you in a few days and I'll let you know what happens. True to his word, he called in 3 days and said the place was ours if we still wanted it. Of course I said yes, and 2 days later we arrived in Jeffersonville to move into our new duplex. However, there was still that one small detail of finding a job so that we could have some regular income. Plus, the job needed to match my school schedule since that was my main priority. Again, I had some quiet time with the Lord. Father, you know our needs. I'm so thankful for this home and how faithful you've been so far. I really need a job though, preferably one that fits with my school schedule and leaves the flexibility for my wife to use our one car if she needs to. Please, I am really in need and I don't want to look like a failure in front of my family. Within a week, I learned of a job that was not only in the evening so I could go to school during the day, but it turns out it was 2 blocks from where we lived, so I could simply walk there and my wife could use the car in the evenings when she needed to. Is the Lord amazing or what? Again, I was just in awe of how faithful the Lord continued to be to our family and how he works all things for good to those who love him, as it says in Romans 8:28. And if that wasn't enough, one day at church, a couple in our Bible study group comes up to me and they say, "Hey, Roberto, we have an extra car and the Lord put it on my heart to simply give it to you if you want it." Wow, how good is the Lord? I was very grateful and I accepted this generous gift. Now, the interesting thing is that they didn't even know that we needed an extra car. So now we had 2 cars, so my wife could use the car whenever she needed to, even when I was at school. What an amazing God we serve. Well, we ended up living in that duplex for 3.5 years. And I worked for that same company 2 blocks down the road for the same amount of time before we had to move back to the West Coast. Now, it is truly miraculous how the Lord puts all the puzzle pieces together when you step out on faith to His calling. Now, a couple of months after moving to Jeffersonville and after beginning my studies, we got hit with a very intense financial crisis, which caused us to lean on the Lord like never before. And I'm going to share the story with you, but it will have to be for another time. Thank you so much for watching, and Lord willing, I will see you in the next video.